All right, welcome back to Genius. So today we'll talk about arrow functions. We'll talk about the this keyword. I'm laughing because the this keyword is something that if you don't have proper training or proper understanding of it, you might just be scared of it. But don't worry, I'm going to make it easy for you to understand. And we'll talk about callback functions. So let's dive right into it. Okay. So we will talk about you'll be reading, you don't know JavaScript, you'll be reading the This and Object Prototype, chapter 2 to 3. Okay, if you don't have this book, please request for it. Okay. All right, practice with the timer or simple map app with callbacks. Okay. Now, what is the this keyword? Okay. What is the this keyword? The this keyword is one of the most confusing but very important part of JavaScript. It is very confusing, but it's very, very important part of JavaScript. So you can't run away from it if you want to be really a good JavaScript developer or programmer. Okay. So its values depends on where a function is defined. Its value depends not where a function is defined. The value of this keyword does not depend on where the function was defined, but how it is being called. Now, let me give you a hint. So I have okay, let's say I have this function, and this function, I'm just going to say console.log this. Okay, then I'm going to call this function. Okay, I will save. Then I'm going to run. So let me click on run. So you can see that this keyword has a whole lot of it, but basically it is from the global, it is actually the global object. Okay, but it has bunch of things here. Okay, so here this keyword is available. Because of where am I calling this function? I'm calling this function on the global scope. Remember scoping that we did. I'm calling this function on the global scope. This is the entire file, all right? And I'm calling this function inside of this file, like the global scope. And that is why it has to be the global object. So this keyword is the global object. So it depends on, the value varies. The value of this keyword varies, okay? Depending on the value doesn't depend on where the function is defined. The value depends on where the function is called. So this is a special keyword. This keyword is a special keyword that refers to the execution context. So what is the execution context of a function? Where did you execute that function? What is the execution function context of the function? So see, you see that book, Why You Don't Know JavaScript Enough. Make sure you read that book. There's a reason why we gave you that book, okay? That book will open your eyes when it comes to this keyword and also even the execution context, scoping, and stuff like that. So in simple terms, the object that is currently calling the function is the this keyword. The object that is currently calling the function is the this keyword. You're going to see more of it, but let me just show you. Let me show you. So let's say I have this function and I have an object. So I will just create an object. Let's say a student object. I'm just going to show you varieties of this keyword. So I have a student object, and then the student object has a core property that's actually a function. Okay. There's something I want to do. I want to get it right. Okay, it is actually okay. It is the func. Okay, so it's the func. So I would also have other properties like age of the student 90. So if I save this thing now and I come here and I call the student dot call, okay. So if I call this function now, let's run this code and see what we get. I run this code. You see what we get. This dot call, Yes, it should give. What did it give us? It still gave us the global scope. Um, okay, my example is not correct. Okay. Okay, so I think this is what it printed out. This is the thing it printed out. Okay, yeah, this is what I'm expecting it to print. I'm expecting it to for this to be the object, the student object. That's what I'm expecting. Okay, see, to avoid confusion, let me run this thing in the terminal, and I would use node. And the name of our this thing is index. So, okay, it's still calling. Okay, so okay, now let me change. Okay, let me make this thing. Okay, so based on the okay, so I will now say console.log. So if I call this, okay, you can just understand the differences here. So I'm going to clear. So I'm going to call index this function. This I'm going to run this code again using node. Okay, this is actually front end, right? Most of you might not really know what the node is. It's okay, but you might not even have node installed in your computer. So what you can do is if you don't have node installed, you can just open your browser because I linked this script to this index so I can go live and then I will see the call function on the console. So inspect, if I go to console, okay, so it's printing out Windows this object, and this object is a student object. So let me see why it's printing out. On browser, this keyword is the window object. Don't worry, you'll see more of that later. Okay, so I'm saying, oh, no wonder. Oh my God. Okay, so my confusion was when I was running this code where is it again? When I was running, the global scope was also being called. It's because of I'm still calling this function. So when I'm running this thing inside of JavaScript environment, like node environment, it is the global object is the this keyword. But when I'm running it on the browser, it is the window object. So if I go back to the browser, uh, that's why the window object was also being consoled here. So it's because I was calling the two functions. So let me take my code back. All right. So I wanted to explain to you that depending on where you are calling, it doesn't matter where you defined the function. All right. It's not where this keyword doesn't really, it doesn't matter where you define the function. What matters is where you're calling it. So in this case, I said that the call this call what's it called again? This call property I'm assigning this function. Remember, you can assign a function to a variable. Remember, so I'm assigning this function that I created here to this call. So whenever I call this call function, this function will be called. So now, remember, this function was declared in the global scope, but right now this function is being called under the scope of this object. So where this keyword, what would it be? Would it be the global object or will it be the student object? Like I said, this keyword the value depends not on where the function is created, it depends on where you're calling the function. It depends on where you're calling the function. Okay. Okay, so you can see that if I run this code now, what I'm doing here is that I am taking this function, which is a function, in this case, a function variable now, and I'm assigning it to function expression, sorry, and I'm assigning it to this variable. So if I call this function now, this keyword will refer to the student because it doesn't depend on where the function was defined. The function was defined in the global scope, but who is calling this function? Who is calling the function? It is the student object. So what I will get in this keyword now will become the student object. So I prefer using terminals. If I run this now, I will get the student. Okay. So I don't know. Okay, so my terminal is not it's not responding. Okay, so I will go and open it in HTML in the browser. And if I open up the console, you will see that this keyword is the student object. Yes, that's the object here. You see, it is the student object. Okay, so now the object that is currently calling the function is the this keyword. The this keyword is the object that is calling the function. So look at it. It is the object that is calling the function. In this case, it is the student object. Okay. So, but if I run this, call this func keyword, if I call this func function, all right, the object will be the window object, like the browser, if I'm running it on the browser. But if I'm running it on Node.js, it will be, the object will be the global object. Okay, so um, its value changes based on how and where the function is invoked. Where and how the function is invoked. So in this case, the function is being invoked here. The object that is calling this function, remember that this call function, the value is this other function. So that is, we are calling it here and the object is the student. But if if I just run the func function, if I just call it, all right, go back to the browser. In this case, it's going to be the window object. You see, it's the window object because I'm calling it on the global scope. So for the browser, the global scope is the window object, but for Node.js, what is happening now? Okay, let me just close this terminal. Let me open a new one. Okay, so if I run, what is happening? Okay, node index. You can see now I got the global object here. So on node, the global object, the global object is actually the global object. But on the browser, the global object is the window object. Okay, all right. So now the this in the global context, okay? When you're calling the this keyword in the global context, that is exactly what I'm doing here. When I'm calling the this keyword in the global context, the this object is the window on the browser, but on Node.js, the this keyword is the global object, okay? So in the browser, when it is on non-strict mode, this refers to the window object. But in Node, it refers to the global object. Okay? Then there is something we call the strict mode in JavaScript. When I run the this keyword in strict mode on the global context, the this keyword becomes undefined. All right? So um if I go now, if I at the top of my script, if I say use strict, I hope I am correct. Yee, no. Okay, there's a mistake here. It's supposed to be in double quote. So if I say use strict, guess what? All right. If I run this code again, let me clear. It's going to be undefined because on strict mode, all right, the this keyword is undefined. Look at it, it is undefined. Let me expand. You can see that it is undefined on strict mode. If you say you want to use the strict on, this is how to define your program to be on strict mode. Okay, but if I remove it, it's going to be the global object. So if you're using, short, mostly you should be using strict mode because there are a lot of things the strict mode will help you to, a lot of errors it will help you to avoid. But we'll talk about it later on. Okay, we'll talk about it later on. So it is undefined. So on strict mode, the, when you use strict, it will be undefined. The disk keyword will be undefined. There is a reason, but don't worry, I'm not going to talk about it now. But just make sure that when you're running JavaScript on strict mode, this keyword on the global context, if it's not under a function or an object, on the global context, it is undefined on strict mode. But inside of a function, all right, uh, in non-strict mode, the this keyword becomes the browser or the window or the Node.js on non-strict mode. But on strict mode, normal this thing, it is also undefined. That is exactly, in short, um, to avoid anything, make sure you're using strict mode in most of your programs. In all your programs, just use strict mode, okay? Because of this confusion. This keyword, when you're using strict mode, in a function, it is the browser. In non-strict mode, it is the browser. On browser, it is the window. On Node.js, it is the global object. But on strict mode, whether it's on the global context or inside of a function, it is undefined. Do you understand? It is undefined. All right. So inside of an object, all right, if a function is called as an object method, this refers to that object. So now look at what we are saying. If I say, okay, let me explain all these things that I've just said here. Let me explain it. So without strict mode, let me just comment this. If I'm on without strict mode, okay, so I will also comment this function. I will comment this function. I will comment everything. So let's try it on the global context. On the global context, I'm going to say console.log, and I will say this. So this is on the global context. So this is the global scope. At what scope are we making this call? We are making this call on the global scope. So on the global scope, on the browser, it is the window object. All right, on the browser, it is the window object. In Node.js, it is the global. In Node.js, okay, yeah, I have saved. Okay, so in Node.js, it is the global object or an empty object like this. Okay, I think we saw something like that. Okay, on Node.js, okay, it is an empty object. All right, so that's the global object. Okay, so in Node in Node.js refers to the global. It's like I am using the strict. Okay, so let me just take this thing out finally, and then I'll run again. Okay, so on the global scope, it's an empty object. Okay, on the global scope, but when we are using on strict mode, it is going to be undefined. Even on strict mode, it is still use strict. What am I not doing right here? Okay, so even on strict mode, it's still giving me the empty object. Okay, no problem. So inside of a function, this keyword under on strict mode is, let me call this function here. This keyword on strict mode is what? Is the global object. Okay, on non-strict mode, sorry, on non-strict mode. And when you go to the browser, it is the window object. But on strict mode, all right, on strict mode, let's see what it gives us. You see that even me that is even teaching you, somehow I'm even confused. So on strict mode, it is undefined. And when we go to the browser, it's also undefined. Okay, then on an object level, so on an object level, I'm going to take this guy out, and then I will comment this one. On an object level, oops, on an object level, okay, I will just have to say the core function would be a function, okay, and this function will just do console.log this. So on a function context, on a function level, so on a function level, if I say student.core, it will student.core. All right, this code is actually this property or this method in this student object. So if I run this now in Node.js, is going to be the student object. It's going to be the object that calls it. So the student object is what we have here. Remember how we create objects. Now this is an object and this is the property. These are the properties, the key value pairs. Okay. So, but on the browser, all right, it will also give us the student object. Do you understand? That's what we have here. So just play around with this to make sure you understand what we are talking about here. Okay. So on strict mode, whether you're using strict mode, okay, so on strict mode, this keyword inside of a function will be undefined. Anything that has to do with strict mode, all right, is going to be undefined. Or just play around with it for you to even get a feel of it. So if a function is called as an object method, this keyword refers to the object itself. You have just seen it. When I called this keyword inside of the object method, we got the object as this keyword. So if you assign the method to a variable, this keyword is get lost. So now, so look at this example. So I am saying user.greet. Remember that this user.greet is a method, right? You know, I can also assign a method to a variable. So if I now try to assign this method to a variable and then call it, now remember that this keyword depends not on where the function is created, it depends on where and how it is being called. So in this case, we are calling this function outside of the user object. So let me show you. So if I now come and say, of course, if I say student.call, I will get this keyword to be the object or the student object. But if I say, but if I say const call func, okay, so I'm creating a function and I'm assigning it to this. Remember, you can assign functions to a variable. So if I go on now and call this call func, this keyword will be lost. It will no longer be the student object. It will no longer be the student object because where are we calling this function? We are calling it on the global context. So if I save this thing now, and run again, I will get the global object. And if I go to the browser, I will get the window object. So I have lost this keyword to be the student object that created this method. Please be careful when you're working with this keyword, okay? So this keyword inside of an arrow function behaves somehow. Arrow functions do not have their own this keyword. So if you call this keyword inside of an arrow function, they inherit from the outer scope. So if you create an arrow function and then you're inside of the arrow function, you're making reference to this keyword. This keyword will refer to the outer scope. Whoever is the outer scope, the outer lexical scope, is going to be this keyword. So let me show you. So if I create if I create an arrow function, if I say const arrow func equal to an arrow function, okay, and I'll say console.log. Arrow functions does not have their own this keyword. So they will take the outer scope. What do you think is the outer scope of this arrow function? This arrow function, what do you think is the outer scope? The outer scope is the global scope. That is where we are defining it. We are defining it inside of the global scope. All right? That's where we are defining it. So this keyword now will be the global scope. And I'm calling it in a non-strict mode. So if I run this code now, it will give us the global scope. Oh, sorry, I have not called the function. Sorry about that. I didn't call the function. So if I save now, and I call the function, it gives us, in Node.js, it gives us an empty object, which is the global, okay? And when I go to the browser, it gives us the window. So what am I saying? Arrow functions do not have their own this keyword. If you're using this keyword in an arrow function, just know that it refers to the outer object. So now, let's assume that this function is what is, I'm using an arrow function here. and we said that the arrow function would, this keyword will refer to the outer scope. What do you think is the outer scope of this function now? This call function method now is an arrow function. And we said that they would take the scope, this keyword will refer to the scope of the outer scope. So if I go on now and say student dot call, this keyword will refer to what exactly? Let's see. It gives us the outer lexical scope, the lexical outer scope, which is an empty distance here. If I go to the browser, it gives us a window. So this is very tricky. This is very tricky. Okay, so the scope of this function now is not even the student object. It is actually the outer scope, which is the windows. So be very careful. Be very careful when you work with this keyword. Make sure you test it. Debug it first before you even start making use of. Make sure when you write a program like this, make sure that this keyword is referring to the right thing you intended it for. Okay. So they inherit this keyword from the lexical outer scope. And then in this case, now I'm using an arrow function here. So when I say this dot name, in this case now, my intention is that I am calling this user object. No, the outer scope is actually the global scope. And in the global scope, we do not have any variable called name. So it will give us undefined. Just be careful. That is why mostly, please always use strict mode. Okay. So in this case, if you say user.greet, it will give us undefined. Okay. This keyword, arrow functions do not have their own this keyword. But inside another function, arrow functions preserve this keyword. If the arrow function is inside of another function, so look at it. We have a function called person, okay? And inside of it, we are running an arrow function inside of this set timeout. So this keyword, what is the outer scope? This is the function scope. The outer scope is the function scope. So this here will refer to the function scope, no longer the global scope. I hope you're with me. All right. If you understand what I've been saying so far, I don't even need to do any exercise again. If you understand what I've been saying so far, you understand that this is a function scope. So any arrow function we use inside of this function scope will be the person object, the person function. So in this case, it will no longer be the global scope. Okay, let me use the same example I'm using. So in this case, instead of me just calling this function here, I could just say, okay, I'll take it out and I'll say, I'm not using an arrow function right away. I'll use a normal function. Okay, and inside of this normal function, I might even create another function inside of it. Okay, and there is going to be, what am I even doing? Okay, no problem. Okay, so it's going to be an arrow function. And inside of this arrow function, I'll just say console.log. I'll say console.log this. And inside of, as I'm completing the function, I will say, I will call func. Okay, there is a problem here. What is the problem? There is a problem here. Okay. Okay, so I did not put my parentheses here. All right. So look at what I'm doing. If I call this this method, this call method now, it's actually a function, and inside of it, we are creating another function and we are calling it. So now the console.log is calling this keyword. What do you think would be this keyword? This keyword will be who? This keyword is going to refer to the function scope. Do you understand? The outer scope. Arrow functions take this keyword refers to the outer scope. So the outer scope here is the function, which is the call function now. So if I go ahead now and run this code, if I save, okay, if I save, you see, the outer scope here is the student's object. And that is why we got this. the this keyword here, the inside the arrow function is referring to the outer scope. In this case, is the student object. Okay, so be careful, be careful, be careful. So in this case now, the this keyword here is referring to the function object, the function scope. Okay. So the this in constructors, I don't know whether you guys know about constructors, but it has to do with classes. So, but we also have something we call the constructor function. But since I have not discussed, I don't think I have talked about it in this program, so I will skip it. Okay, but when a function is used as a constructor, the this refers to the newly created object. So in this case, now this is a function constructor. So we use this function constructor to create an object. So whenever we create an object using this, the new person, and give it a name here, this keyword will refer to the instance of the object created. Don't bother if you don't get it. So the this keyword in classes refers to the instance of the class. We have not talked about classes, so I won't talk about this because we have not talked about classes. But whenever you're using this keyword in a class, whether it is in Java, whether it is in C++, C#, this keyword always refers to the instance of that class. So this keyword in event handlers, all right, in normal function, this refers to the element that triggered the event. But for arrow function, this keyword inherits from the outer scope, not the element. So in this case, we are saying document.query selector, and we are selecting a button, and we are adding event listener, the click event listener. And then we are using a normal function as the callback function for this our event handler. So this keyword will refer to the button that we just got, the button that we selected. But if we had used an arrow function, remember that arrow function does not have its own this keyword. It refers to the outer scope. So here we are using an arrow function, and this case now it is referring to the outer scope, and the outer scope could be window or any other one that is outer scope. So when you're working with event handlers, if you want to make use of this keyword and you want to refer to the element that you actually selected or handle the event, please make sure that you're not using a function, an arrow function. Make sure that you're using the normal function. Okay, so you can manually set this keyword. You can manually set this keyword. How can you do that? Okay. You can actually use the call method to invoke functions with specific this. You can actually use the apply method. You can actually use the bind method. Okay. So now look at what I'm going to do now. The first example is we have a function, the greet function, and we are saying console.log message plus the this.name. So I can manually explicitly say the disk I want to make the disk keyword to be another object. So in this case, I have a person object. So if I say greet.call, okay, let me be more practical here. Okay. So let me take this guy out. Okay. I will just say name. I can just say first name. First name is John. Okay. So now I might have another function. The function name is greet, and this greet takes in a name. Okay. So now I can say console. Oops, no. It's console dot log. I will say this dot name. So let's assume I'm not taking any parameter here. So now remember that if I call this function right away, I'm going to this keyword will refer to the window. But what if I want to explicitly apply, give it, I want to explicitly bind it to an object. Okay, let's say I have another object here, and this object is like a person object, and this person object is something like age 45. So here I have two objects, but in this case, who do I want to greet? I can explicitly bind, I can say, um, greet dot call. All right, I can say greet dot call, and I'll give it the object I want to bind it to. This case, I choose to use the student object. All right, and of course, there's no parameter, there's no argument expected. So if I run this code now, I have two objects and I have a method. So in this case, this keyword now, I have explicitly bind. How do you even speak this? Is it binded or bound? I'm so sorry, guys. I'm not interested in speaking English, please. So, okay, so I have now I have actually I'm so sorry. I don't even know. Is it binded? No, there's nothing like binded. You see, bound. I have bound. Okay, I'm not interested in speaking English, so Mona, leave me alone. Okay, so I have bound. If it's not correct, just correct me. It's up to you. So, but you know what I'm trying to say. Now, I have bound this keyword now to the student object. So when I say greet, which is this function dot call, call is one of the methods. Call is one of the, if I take it back, call is one of the method you can use to explicitly control the this keyword. So in this case, I'm explicitly controlling the this keyword to be the student object. So now if I run this call now, if I run this function now, this keyword will be the student, and in this case we don't have a name, but we have a first name. So I'll have to change this thing to first name. If not, there will be an error. Okay, and if I save it and run this code and I get John, do you understand? I get John. So I've explicitly okay, let me go with this keyword only. So in this case, I bound hi I bounded, I binded it, or I bound it with, and wow, I bound it with the student object. So if I run it now, I'm going to get student object. I can also change it. Oh, I don't want to bind it again with the student object. I want to change it to the person object. And if I run this, I'm going to get this person object instead of the student object. So this is a way of you explicitly taking control of which object do you want this keyword to be. All right. So there's another one called apply. Apply. Okay. When I run this, it will still give us the same thing. Okay. But the difference between call and apply is that apply can take arguments as an array. Okay. Apply can take arguments as an array. So if I want to provide arguments to this, I'll put it inside of an array. So let me show you the difference. So let's assume that this our greet function takes in a message, a message parameter. So I can say use the backtick. Um, I can say message. I can say message. Oops. I can say message. First of all, let me close my backtick. I can say message, and then I can now do this for this guy. I'll say this dot name, or this dot first name. All right. So now I would also give a first name to, I'll give a first name to the person object. So I'll also give a first name. So in this case now, if I use the call, all right, because of the greet method expects a message, a parameter, in this case it's an argument. So if I want to pass the argument to this call to this greet function now, because I'm using the call to bind the object, the disk object, I am now going to say, okay, the message is hello. Oops. So if I run this code now, I'm going to get hello, hello undefined. Okay, first name. Oh, sorry. I spelled it wrongly. It's supposed to be first name. So if I go on now, I'll get hello person because in this case, the object I'm binding to this thing is person. I can change it to be student. And if I save and run this, and I get John. So you can say I'm changing, I have the control. Who do I actually bind this keyword to? So this might be hard for you to grab. It's okay. Rewatch this video, read the book. Okay. I can also use the apply, but the difference between call and apply is that when I'm passing the argument, I'll pass it as an array. That's the only difference. Okay. If I try it now, it works fine. But what if I do not pass it as an array? Let's see. It might still pick it. Let's see. There's an error. Okay. So we have to pass it as an array. The arguments, if it is just one argument, you put only one item in there. Okay. So that's the difference. Then we also have another one, the bind. Okay, the difference, the next one is the bind. The bind returns a new function which bound this, with bound this. Okay, so it's nothing like bind, it's bound. Okay, so if I use the bind method will return another function, a new function that is bound to this keyword. So play around with this thing. So if I try and say bind, so the bind will return a function. And this function, I can just call it, I call it binded. So if I run now, I don't think I will get anything because I'm not calling the function. All right, so I will now have to call the function. I will now say binded. Okay, so in this case, this keyword is referring to the student object, so it will give me hello, John. If I change the object to be person, it will change it, and this keyword will refer to the student object. Okay, so you can see how I have manually done it actually. So you can actually pause the video and take a look at the example. Okay, all right. So we also have this keyword in set timeout and set interval. In normal function, this defers to the global object. When you're having, because the set timeout always uses in normal function, it would and it is if it is on non-strict, it should be the global object. But arrow function will inherit from the enclosing scope, which is the function itself. So play around with these things. All right. Arrow function, this will inherit from the outer scope. So play around with this. This keyword in object copying, if you borrow a method from another object, this changes depending on the color. So if you have understood what I've been teaching you so far, you will know that once you change the object that is calling it, it will refer to that object. This keyword refers to the object that is calling that function. Whether you actually borrowed the object, the method or not, this keyword refers to who is calling the function. Okay, so in this case, we have object 2 and object 1. So object 2 has a greet method and we are assigning it to the object 1 method. But this case, the this keyword was created in object 1 and the this keyword does not work like that. This keyword does not, the value of the this keyword doesn't depend on where it is created. It depends on who is calling. So in this case, we are saying object.greet, object 2 dot greet. So who is calling this greet function now? It is the object 2, and the name will be Bob instead of Alice. Okay. Arrow functions are a shorter syntax for writing functions. All right. So they are also called fat arrow function because of this arrow that looks fat. The arrow operator. So unlike traditional functions, arrow functions don't bind their own this keyword or even the arguments or super or new target. So whenever you're using an arrow function, this keyword does not belong to the arrow function. They don't even have their own. That is, whenever you call a function and you want to get the arguments of that function, you can use the arguments keyword to get it. Okay, so traditionally, this is the normal way you write function, but for arrow function, this is how you write it. So you have seen me write so many arrow functions already. So I can clean everything here and let's go with an arrow function. I'll say constant arrow func is equal to, you open parentheses like this, use the fat arrow operator and this. Remember, console dot, if you say console dot this, the this keyword refers to the outer. In this case, the this keyword will become the window or the global object. Okay, so if you try to say this dot arguments, even when you give it arguments, it doesn't still work. So it will not have its own arguments object, even when it takes an argument. Okay, if I call this function now, if I say arrow func and the message is hi, okay, I want to print out the arguments object. So let me clear. Oh, I'm using the command prompt. Clear will not work. Okay, so I open a new one. What am I even doing? Okay, I'm using git bash. I want to use git bash. Okay, so if I say node index, okay. So what is it saying? The arguments. Okay, so you can see that it didn't give me the arguments I'm looking for. But if this was a normal function, let me show you the difference. If this was a normal function, okay, and I have this message, and then I'm doing console.log. This argument, let me just say func. Let's see the difference. You see, we got it. Okay, and you can see that the first item here is high. But in this case, when we run it in the arrow function, we didn't get it. It was empty. So this will not be available in arrow functions, but it will be available in normal functions, if you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so forms of arrow function, we have the ones that have no parameters. So with no parameters, you can just do it like this, empty, empty. There are different types of arrow function. The first one is arrow function that has no parameters. So this case, let me just change it. So this is an arrow function that has no parameter. Okay, another one is the one that can take a parameter, and you can do like this. And if it is just one parameter, you can even remove the parentheses, something like this. This is valid. Okay, so this is single parameter, no parentheses needed. Okay, something like this. So if your arrow function only contains one parameter, you can remove the parentheses. But please, I prefer to always use parentheses. It makes my code clearer and easier to read. Multiple parameters, parentheses is needed. Whether I'm using single parameter or not, I always like to use parentheses. Okay, so this can also be, I can rewrite this function to be, instead of putting this curly braces like this, I can do something like this. This is also valid. But for me, I like putting my parentheses. This is very, very valid. This is very, very valid. But I like putting my parentheses. So we have the block body. Okay, I like using the block body always. I like using parentheses and block body always to be more readable. a block body. You can also have an arrow function that returns an object. So if your arrow function is returning an object, make sure without a what's it called again? Without without the body, the block body, make sure you're returning it in parentheses. Make sure you're returning it in parentheses, returning an object. Okay. So key features, they are very concise syntax to use. They are shorter and cleaner than normal functions. If the body is a single expression, return is not required. So you don't need to put the return keyword, okay? In this case now, if it's just returning a single expression, you don't even need to put the return keyword. You can do something like this. Let's assume now that this function is just returning a single thing. I don't need to say return. I don't need to say return hello. No. All right. I can just remove the return like this. This is valid. But if I have it in a block, I must use the return keyword. Then I'll close up here. So, but if it's just a single value, I can just use I don't need to use the block or the return keyword. So in this case, I'm just returning A plus B. The sum is just returning A plus B. So know this bind, the arrow functions don't have their own. We have talked about this a lot already. So no arguments object. Arrow functions do not have their own arguments object. I just showed you. If you want to do that, you can use the rest parameters. Okay. The not constructor, you cannot use new with arrow functions. It does not have its own prototype property. Arrow functions don't have their own prototype property. You don't even need to bother about what prototype is at this stage. Don't bother about it because it's like very, very confusing. Okay. They don't have any super binding. Okay. This has to do with classes, okay, and inheritance. Arrow functions cannot define their own super. They inherit from an enclosing context useful in classes. So you always have this thing when we are working with classes. So callbacks in array methods, event handlers, that is why you use arrow functions. But if you need the this to refer to the element, remember when you're getting document.get an element, whatever, the function, make sure you're using a normal function. If you want the this keyword to refer to use a normal function instead of using an arrow function. If you want to make reference to the element with the this keyword, instead of a class, the this keyword is also preserved for arrow functions. When not to use arrow functions as object methods, if you want this keyword to refer to the object, don't use arrow functions. As constructors cannot be used with new, when you need arguments object directly, don't use arrow functions. If you want to have access to the argument object, don't use the arrow function. If you want to make your function to be a constructor, don't use arrow function. So in summary, arrow functions are shorter, cleaner functions. Implicit return when one line. They don't have their own this keyword, great for callbacks and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the final thing we'll talk about are callback functions. What are callback functions? They are just functions that are like parameters. When you have a parameter, when you're giving a function as an argument to a function, it becomes a callback. So if a callback function is simply a function that is passed as an argument to another function, and it's executed later inside a function. So in other words, one function calls back another function when it's done. You're going to enjoy this callback function later on, okay? So in this case, now we have the greet function, and it's taking a callback. And here inside of this greet function, we are calling this function as a function. So let's go and write something. So let's say I have a function. I have a function called greet. And inside of this greet function, I am expecting two variables, a message variable and a callback. Now, this callback is going to be a function. So inside of here, I can say callback, and I'm calling it as a function. I can even say console.log my message, no problem. So, but look at what I'm doing here. That means if I call this greet function, I'm going to pass in another function as an argument. So if I go now and say greet, so the message is hello, and my function can actually be an arrow function. I can use an arrow function. All right. I can use an arrow function. I can use a normal function. So I can say console. So it's up to you to provide the function that you want. I can say console.log. I am a callback function. So what am I doing here? This is a function. I can even take this thing out and store it as a variable. I can call it func and then do this. Then I can now pass the function variable as a parameter. So what will happen whenever this function runs, it will come here, call console.log, then this func, it will now call it. Remember, this is calling the function here. So if I do this, save, we are going to have hello, which is this one. All right. And the callback function is being called, which is I am a callback function. So if I change my code here, it will still reflect. So in this case, I have a function that is taking another function as an argument. Okay, so that's a callback function. So in this case, we have say goodbye as a function, and then we are passing it in here. Okay. Why use callback function? To reuse code, pass different functions as arguments to handle asynchronous operations. So when we start talking to APIs, making API calls, reading files, and all those things, you get to appreciate callback functions very well, especially when you start working with Node.js to ensure that something happens only after something else finishes. So you can actually control when that particular function can be called. You see this function here, I can control whenever it is being called inside of this function. Okay. So we have synchronous and asynchronous callbacks. The asynchronous callbacks are executed immediately in order, while asynchronous callbacks are not executed immediately. So you get to enjoy these things when we talk about async and await promises. Okay, when we talk about promises, when we talk about async and await, we'll talk about this asynchronous and synchronous functions. So synchronous functions are called immediately in the same order, while asynchronous functions are called later. They are executed later after a delay, after an EP. Don't worry, you're going to enjoy these things very, very, very well. I promise you that. So in this case, now this set timeout will be this function is a callback function. It's taking a callback function, so it will be called after 2 seconds. So this is an asynchronous function inside of this time set timeout. We also have callbacks with array methods. The for each, the map method, the filter method, the reduce method, they all take callbacks as for their as example. So you also have, when you register an event listener, you're also passing a callback function. All right. So the function you pass into an event handler is a callback function. In this case, this arrow function is a callback function. They have something we call a callback here, which is a problem with callback. When you look at this code, we are using set timeout 1, 2, 3 in the same code. So there will be a hell here. When callbacks are nested inside another callbacks, it leads to a messy, hard to read code known as callback hell. So callback hell is when you're nesting callbacks inside of another callback. Avoid it. Okay, you can pass an anonymous function instead of naming. You also know what we mean by an anonymous function. So in this case now, if I don't want to use this function that is name, I can create an anonymous function here. I can just say function like this, and I do whatever I want to do. So this function now does not have any name, so it's an anonymous function. So you can use anonymous functions as callback functions too. So in summary, a callback function is a function passed to another function to be executed later. They can be synchronous, runs immediately, or asynchronous, runs after a delay or an event. They are widely used in array methods, event listeners, timers, API calls, and file and IO calls too. Too many nested callbacks will result to callback here. So we use promises and a sync and wait to solve them. So that will be the next thing we will discuss, okay? Woo! Thank you much. Thank you very much, guys. I'm already exhausted. I think this is a long video. Please, if you find understanding it, if you find it difficult, please rewatch this video, okay? Make sure you even take this video 2 times. All right? Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next class. Have a great day.